Yeah, twins pod. Why do you, Rob? Why do you think the situation in Ukraine evolved in a war under Biden's presidency and didn't nothing occur while Trump was in office?
I mean, I think they wanted the war.
Yeah, who wanted the war?
The people specific. I think Biden has always been in league with this group called the neocons. He's always been a warmonger his whole career. He was the Democrat who led the charge for the Iraq War. My uncle was leading the charge against it, and my uncle was very close to Biden. But Biden has always been like that. But the U.S., the people who wanted the war. I mean, who wanted the war? There's a group who've been dominant in the State Department for many, many years, since at least 2001, called the neocons. They're the same people who got us in the Iraq War, which was just dreamed up.
Right,
Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with bombing the World Trade Center.
Yeah, what did Bush say? They got weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, so they just lied us into it. But he was surrounded by neocons. Dick Cheney was one. Paul Wolfowitz.
Got to throw a Bush in there.
Yeah, Bush was it was the neocons who were running that administration. They were then discredited. But a lot of them had high places in the State Department, including Victoria Nuland, who is the person who essentially orchestrated the war in Ukraine war, and then who really wants that war? The war is about the extension of NATO into Ukraine. The Russians don't want the extension of NATO, like we wouldn't want Russian bases in Mexico.
In Cuba or
exactly.
in Texas.
Exactly. I was involved, when I was a kid in the Cuban Missile Crisis. My dad was, spent 13 days on a cot in the White House, and we were, the U.S. Marshals came to our house to move us to underground bunkers down in Southern Virginia, down in the Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge Mountains,
Yeah. But what happened with Ukraine, the people who want to extend NATO, see, when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, Gorbachev, who was then the premier of Russia, went to President Bush and and John Major, who was the prime minister in England, and said, "Look, I'm going to do something that is going to mean I can no longer go back to Russia ever again, which is because the Russian people are going to hate me, but I'm going to do something that is good for the world, which is I'm going to allow Germany to reunite." There was an East Germany and West Germany at that point. Well, East Germany was communist, West Germany was, and there was a wall between them. And he said, "I'm going to allow them to unite under NATO, and I'm going to move out 450,000 Soviet troops, and we're going to give you our barracks, and we're going to give you our bases, and you can move in there. But I want to promise, because this is going to destroy me, but I want to promise that you will not move NATO to the east after that."
East Ukraine.
But
you say east
anyway, anywhere, because Russia was going to walk away from all of its former Soviet states, from Georgia, from Poland, from all of these communist states who are now going to be freed.
Yeah, that's a huge sacrifice.
And these were all part of the Russian coalition. And Russia and Gorbachev said, "We don't want you moving." The U.S., a hostile army to circle Russia.
Right.
And so, and James Baker, who was then the Secretary of State under Bush, famously said, "We will not move NATO 1 inch to the east."
Right.
And 5 years later, the first neocon, who was Zbigniew Brzezinski, during the Clinton administration in 1997, published a plan to move NATO into all of the former Soviet states. And at that time, the most important diplomat in American history, George Kennan, who was the architect of the containment policy during the Cold War, said, "This is insanity. If you do that, you're going to force a violent response from Russia. Russia should be our friend. We won the Cold War. The people who are running Russia are people who are allies now. Why are we turning them into an enemy again? Why do you want an enemy out of Russia?"
Right.
And Bill Pierce, who was then the U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, and is now the head of the CIA. He also threatened to resign. He said, if you do this, it's insane. You're making Russia an enemy. Bill Perry, who was the Secretary of Defense under Clinton, threatened to resign because they said this is insanity. Who wants this to happen? It's the neocons ideologically, but also the big military contractors. General Dynamics, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Lockheed. When a new state joins NATO, the part of the contract is that they have to conform their military purchases to NATO specifications.
Wow.
And that means billion-dollar markets, automatic markets, trap markets for those military contractors. And then they have Congress people who are, in the districts where their plants are, who they basically, dictate orders to. So that's what's driving it.
Money.
And
It's not a threat to democracy for Ukraine. That's what I'm hearing from CNN. It's a threat to their democracy. So they've pretty much demonized Putin because he's trying to defend his own borders and way of life.
Well, what happened is Ukraine, first of all, Russia has a legitimate security interest in Ukraine. Russia has been invaded 3 times through Ukraine. The last time they were invaded, Hitler killed 1 out of every 7 Russians.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Imagine that. So,
Right.
Imagine if that had happened here. Of course, if they, people had come through Mexico, we'd say nobody goes to Mexico and nobody.
Right. Why do you think the mainstream media don't point that out?
Because I think they're all,
It makes them like government-ran media.
Yeah, they're government-run, essentially. So then, so we put also. We've moved NATO now 1,000 miles to the east, not 1 inch, 1,000 miles into 14 new countries. We put Aegis missile systems, which are nuclear-capable Tomahawk missiles, in Romania and Poland, 12 minutes from Moscow, from the Kremlin. We could decapitate the entire Kremlin leadership in 12 minutes, which destabilized. And then we walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russians. The Russians wanted to keep those treaties.
Right.
We wanted to put missiles in to hit Russia. So we put these systems in, and Russia's going, this is crazy. You can't do this.
CNN paints Putin as like this maniac, murdering person. Why would you get that close and put some...
So then what we did, and Ukraine, what Putin kept saying, and what the whole Russian leadership was saying is, whatever you do, and we don't like what you're doing, we think it's terrible and it's destabilizing, but you can't do it in Ukraine. Ukraine is a red line for us, and they said from the beginning, we're going to go to war if you do it.
Right.
So then Ukraine had a government, an elected government.
I heard it was fixed.
2014, no, they had an elected government that was neutral. That was trying to walk the line and not go too west and not go too Russian. We overthrew it. We spent $5 billion. Victoria Nuland ran the project to overthrow that government.
Aren't we a threat to their democracy if we don't?
Of course. We destroyed their democracy. And
that's crazy.
There's a tape recording that we now have. You can look it up on the internet, where Victoria Nuland is screaming at the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and she's handpicking the cabinet for the new government. This is a month before the overthrow.
What?
And he's saying, well, NATO's object, and she says something like, screw NATO. So we put in a new government. Putin says, okay, what's going to happen now? I have one warm water port, which is in Sevastopol or Vladivostok on the Black Sea, and they said, and now the U.S. fleet is going to come in there and take our port because Ukraine's going to invite them in there. So in Crimea, so he said, I'm not going to do that. We're going to go in. He goes into Crimea without firing a shot, not killing a single person, because the people of Crimea, half the people in Russia on the eastern part, in Ukraine, are all Russian.
Right. They speak Russian. Yeah.
Right. And they're ethnic Russian, and Ukraine welcomed the Russians in. So we said, oh, look, he took over Ukraine, but he took it over and they wanted to be taken over. Then Donbass and Lugansk vote to join Russia, these two eastern provinces. And because as soon as that new government came in, which was, there were a lot of them were these ultra-right people who were glorifying the Nazis. Stefan Bandera, who was a Nazi, they put a statue of him up, and they're very.
There's a Nazi problem in Ukraine, right?
There's a huge Nazi problem. Well, the new government says, okay, we're going to ban the Russian language, which half the people in Ukraine speak.
Right.
And so there's now mass protests in Donbass and Lugansk, and they said, you just, got rid of our language. And the Ukrainian government starts shooting them. They killed 14,000 of them. And Putin the whole time is saying, these are, Russian. It would be like if Mexico started killing American expatriates who were living in.
Right.
And
I was talking to a banker. He's from Russia, Ukraine. And he told me to my face, he said, everybody in Ukraine hates Zelensky and they're pro-Russia. I don't know how true that was, but he said that's the sentiment he shared with me.
Yeah, well, I think in part of the Ukraine that is true.
Yeah.
And my son actually went over and fought in Ukraine.
Oh, really?
He and I differed on that war, and he was in law school and he left and he disappeared.
Your son got balls.
He joined the Foreign Legion, and he was a machine gunner and in a special forces unit. He fought in the Kharkiv offensive. And, we never knew where he was. He was just disappeared.
So that whole conflict in Ukraine and Russia, that was all because the United States went back on that word. United States government and NATO.
Yeah. I would say, but, I'm not excusing Putin, and I'm not saying Putin's a good guy.
Right. Yeah.
I'm saying, Putin is, but
Putin responded just way. You do not
Putin
say so.
Responded rationally,
right?
The way that we would respond if somebody did the exact same thing to us. We would respond the exact same way. How do I know that? Because we did in 1962. During the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right. Exactly.
We were ready to go invade Cuba, and we did an embargo and a blockade, and of the ExCom committee that was then advising my uncle, 11 out of 13 of them said we need to invade. And my uncle was like, hold off for a while. Let's see if we can do it another way. And then he agreed secretly. He and my father did a secret agreement with Ambassador Dobrynin at that time and with Khrushchev that if Khrushchev removed the missiles, Khrushchev put the missiles in Cuba because we had put missiles on his border in Turkey.
Right.
And he was saying it's tit for tat.
Right.
And so my father and my uncle said, look, if you remove them tomorrow from Cuba, we will, within 6 months, quietly remove them all from Turkey.
That's when politicians in this country were sane.
Yeah.
As president, how would you think you could fix this situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, I would negotiate a peace. I mean, Putin has repeatedly tried to negotiate a peace, and in fact, he negotiated 2 peace agreements with Zelensky. Zelensky is a U.S. puppet, that we put in there, and he's our puppet there, and he knows if he crosses the U.S., his own ultra-right people will kill him, and the U.S. will stop protecting him. So he does what we say. So. He ran in 2014 or 2019. He ran saying, I'm going to sign, because Putin said, look, I don't want to go into Crimea. Let's negotiate a peace, right? And the peace will be, you agree, 3 things he wanted. He wanted to keep NATO out of Ukraine. That was number 1. He wanted to denazify the Ukrainian government. And he wanted to make Donbass and Lugansk and Crimea semi-autonomous regions of Russia, just like Quebec is a semi-autonomous region of Canada, right? Where they can have their own language and they can protect their citizens, but they're still part of Ukraine. So he negotiated that with Britain, with Germany, and France, and they all agreed on it, and with Ukraine. The Ukrainian parliament refused to ratify it. And Zelensky ran in 2019. He's an actor, right?
Right, yeah.
You know what he did, right?
What did he do?
He had a show. He was a comedian.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And he had a show
right.
about a comedian who, by fluke, gets elected president of Ukraine. That was his show.
Right.
Okay?
I seen him in a video. He's wearing high heels and he's like,
yeah. So
now he's leading the war. And CNN is calling him George Washington. Yeah, he's the new George Washington of Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah. So he then wins the presidency because he ran on one issue, which was peace. I'm going to sign the Minsk Accords. And he gets in there and for some reason immediately pivots and says, I'm not going to. So then Putin says, okay, I'm going into Crimea. He goes into Crimea. He sends 40,000 troops into Donbass and Lugansk. And we say, oh, he's trying to take over Europe.
Right.
There's 44 million people in Ukraine. You can't take over Ukraine with 40,000 troops. He clearly did not want to take over. He wanted Zelensky back at the negotiating table. So Zelensky came back, and the U.S. wouldn't help him. So he went to Naftali Bennett, who's the prime minister of Israel, and he went to Ahmed Erdogan, who's the prime minister of Turkey. And he said, will you help me? And they said, yes. So they negotiated a new deal that was kind of Minsk Accords 2. The Russians agreed to it. Zelensky agreed to it. Zelensky initialed it. The Russian negotiators initialed it. And then Putin began withdrawing all of his troops from Kiev. And then Biden sent Boris Johnson over. Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister of England, sent him over and told Zelensky, you can't do it, tear up the agreement. And they tore it up, and since then, about 500,000 Ukrainian kids have been killed, totally unnecessarily, because of Biden making that order.
We got an important announcement for y'all. A damn important announcement. Sure do. The value of the American dollar is getting weaker and weaker. And don't believe Biden and his lying media. He's a liar. When he tell you there's no inflation. Inflation's going crazy. Look, you see it all around you. You got grocery bills, real estate market, gas prices, everything's going up. Everything going up. Yeah, it's because the strength of our dollar is going down. Just like y'all, we've been trying to find different places to put our money, keep it secure, because every day the Fed is printing money. Yeah, like non-stop. Like it's monopoly money. And of course, mainstream news outlets. Yeah, they ain't going to talk about it. Yeah, they're not going to cover it. So we go to Dr. Kurt Elliott for all our economy updates. That's a damn good white man. Damn good white man. That's a damn good white man. And he's smart too. Yeah, he is. Dr. Kurt Elliott is a precious metals expert and has been working in the gold and silver market for over 20 years. That's a long time. Yes. 20 years? Yeah, that's why we partnered with Dr. Kurt. Go to Hodgetwinsgold.com. Signing up is totally free, and Dr. Kurt's team of advisors will listen to all your concerns you may have about your economic future, talk you through the right plan that especially fits your needs. Go to Hodgetwinsgold.com. It's not our gold. It's just our website. Go to Hodgetwinsgold.com right now and secure your economic future today for you and your family. Man, I wish I had me some gold in my basement. Yeah.